Well, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Building podcast. Today we have Joe, who is working as a senior director of HSE. Joe, why don't you start us off by just giving kind of your current role, organization, and kind of a background of how you got into that?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Thanks for the invite onto the show today. My name is Joe Gilliland. I've been doing health, safety, and environment for about 27 years. So I came out of college, went to school originally for civil engineering, and there's only so many courses I could go through to learn about the puncture resistance of concrete and tensile strengths. And I found another field that really intrigued me, and that was health and safety, and really something that I could do every day to help protect and make sure that the people coming to the job sites were going home in the same condition or better. So that's what drives me. It's been 27 years of a mission to make sure that people are safe and they can spend their quality time with their families.
Mm. Yeah. No, awesome. And what kind of, you mentioned your career path there. How has that changed? How has HSE changed over the course of the 27 years that you've been in the industry?
Yeah, a lot. So, 27 years ago, the programs that were in place were basically every OSHA standard that exists, right? It exists because someone got hurt or something bad happened. So they're all, in an essence, reactive. And they're the bare minimums of what these companies and different contractors need to meet. And when you look at the intent of the OSHA standards, if you followed every OSHA standard that exists, you're still going to have injuries. And so I think that that's where this field has evolved. There is a science to it. There's a behavioral piece. There's also, the engineering piece. We want to make sure we're following what we call in the industry the hierarchy of control, right? So we're not relying on PPE. If there's a situation, we can use administrative controls, or we can use engineering controls, or we can substitute the hazard. We want to be doing that. And I think there's some neat innovations, and we can talk a little bit today about those. But one of them, I toured a warehouse just this week. They're using drones to fly through and go up and scan the barcodes on each of the pallets to report back to the computer software. So the drones run a program, they scan the barcodes, they come back, and the inventory in the warehouse is done in 45 minutes, these giant warehouses. And it never needed a person to go up on a lift or to be elevated and be at that risk of a fall to do that scanning. So there's many examples like that where this industry, health and safety, this field has evolved, and a lot of the jobs are becoming safer because of the technologies that exist now.
Yeah, to your point, I work for a roofing company, and one of the things we've been really doing a lot more of is drone inspections, right? Especially for pitch shingled roofs. It's obviously safe to walk on a flat roof, or mostly safe, but to get on a higher pitch is kind of scary, and setting up the ladders. Like you said, the drone, does it a lot faster, and then I just have to be on the ground, controlling it from my phone, and it's been a real help for my own fear of heights. So
Yeah, and the other aspect for that, if you're in the roofing contract arena, you're most likely doing estimates by yourself, right? So you're considered under the OSHA language, you're considered a lone worker. So now you're doing a hazardous task going on a roof, whether it's a 4-pitch, maybe it's not as bad, a 12-pitch, then you have a little more of an issue. Weather dependent, it's not always sunny and beautiful in the New England states. So you're often up there in the rain and snow. So that drone is paying dividends not only probably for doing measurements and doing bidding, but just the sheer fact that you've been eliminated from that hazard. That's the type of thing that I want to continue to drive in my profession, is that let's look for alternative ways to do a lot of this work. Now, you still have to get on the roof to do the roofing, right? And there's still safe ways to do that. We can't have the drone yet, nail shingles down or lay tar paper. Maybe that'll be maybe
not
that'll
yet.
come in the future, right? But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so kind of going off of that, what does day-to-day operations look like for you in this type of field?
Sure. So I'm currently the senior director of HSE for a pharmaceutical company called Sanofi, and I am the U.S. lead. So I have the U.S. vaccines manufacturing sites that report into me. My day-to-day is understanding, we make a biological product, but there's chemicals that are used to make that product. There's pressures, pressurized systems, steam, utilities, all kinds of other hazards. So for me, it's understanding the hazards that are present and making sure that each of the employees understand the hazards and risks present, and that it's a collaboration and teamwork to make sure that we're protecting them each and every day.
Mm,
It's my goal that each employee comes into their work area and is not exposed to any hazards that are not known to myself, to the staff, or to them in doing work, and that they feel comfortable and explaining those hazards and safety controls and everything. So the day to day for me is I manage a group of wonderful HSE professionals that go out into these areas and work on different risk categories. So whether it's a biological risk, a physical risk, working with contractors and facilities,
mm,
or production risks, working with moving materials within the production zones and moving chemicals and other process materials throughout the process. To the simple hazards of we also have office workers, right, that are working in office environments, and there's hazards posed to them walking and transversing the site. If you talk to HSE folks and you look at the data, most of the incidents that happen when you look across the country are slips, trips, and falls. That's the biggest category of injuries in workplace. When you take those and remove those, that's not the highest risk. So oftentimes companies focus on trying to get the injury numbers down holistically and take a peanut butter approach. And really, you
mm,
should be looking at what hazards and what risks are my employees exposed to, what hazards are they exposed to, and at what interval, and what's the probability that they'll fail. So, back to the roofing example, I'm glad to hear that you guys are using drones in your
mm.
industry and doing that for estimates because you may be a 30-year roofer and never fallen off of a roof, but if you fall off of a two-story roof, chances of survival are very low, right?
Mhm.
That's one of those, high consequence, low frequency events that we're trying to prevent. Ultimately, we want to look at what's the worst case scenario, what's that risk, and how do we best control that risk to make sure that person's safe.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. I think those types of systems have really helped us. And one of the things that our owner always says is always take a second to kind of look at that, right? So like always be mindful of it, because like you said, there's times where we're on a ladder, every day for however many years, and we're not really thinking about it. But he's always like, take a second, think about the risk and how you're going to do it. Make sure the ladder's set up correctly. Make sure all these different things that you wouldn't think about because it's become second nature. But it's important because, like you said, one mistake can end up into a really bad injury or even death. So it's definitely important for sure.
Yeah, so I think the other element in facilities, whether it's roofing or contract work, the time that you spend ahead of the job in pre-planning as far as planning what materials you're going to need, when you're going to need it, the amount of labor, but also
Mm,
planning what safety devices am I going to need? What's the strategy to look at, doing this roof or this area that's going to create the safest environment for my employees, but also you have to make money, right? So it's always a
mm,
balance. There's a point at which, yeah, you might not have wrecked $100,000 scaffold to do a $20,000 roof, right?
mhm.
So there's that balance, but we have to do what we can in our power to make sure that we're making things make sense, that we're protecting the people that are going into these jobs and putting themselves at risk. But there's that pre-planning and there's an understanding before those jobs start that, hey, here are the hazards. As a roofer, your biggest hazard is falling off the roof, right? But what can
Mhm.
cause those issues? The industry, I used to do roofs years ago. I'm going to date myself if I tell you what year I was doing roofs. But we had air nailers with air lines running across all the roofing materials and a lot of trip hazards and a lot of problems. I look at these guys now and they're all using it evolved into the pass load nailers that had gas cartridges, and then those have now really evolved into these Milwaukee and other brand roofing nailers
Mhm.
that are all electric. So they're not dragging any materials around. It's nice and light. You're removing other hazards and other problems, and then all these power ladders and material movers that exist now to get materials on the roof without having to
Yeah.
lift it. So that industry is a good example where these technologies, when the stuff first came out, I remember the first pass load nailers were expensive. They were
Mhm.
$700-800, where you could go buy an air nailer at the time for $100. But that
Mhm.
investment in that new technology pays dividends, and I think that that's the message for your listeners. But look at the total cost, kind of like a car, right? The total cost of ownership. Look at the
Mm.
total cost of proprietorship, of running your business and doing work in the facilities areas. The more money you spend up front, the more planning, that all pays back in the back end. And
Hmm.
then you'll see a faster return on investment. You'll get into more clients like these big pharmaceutical companies like Sanofi and the GlaxoSmithKlines, Lilly's, and Wyeth's. We all have very high standards for safety. And we don't hire companies that don't meet those standards. So we look at the insurance rates, we look at their performance history. So as these vendors want to keep growing their businesses and as they want to keep servicing larger contracts, safety becomes very, very important to the bottom line and to what these companies are looking for because there's bids that come in. If they don't meet the insurance modifying rates or their programs aren't in place, we don't even let the contractors bid because we
Hmm.
want to make sure that their employees are safe when they're doing the job and their safety is as important to us as our own employees.
Hmm.
So much so that when we look at injury rates, most companies look at just their employees, right, to look at their injury rates and how they're doing. We look at everybody that comes into our factories or our properties all inclusively. So if the Coca-Cola delivery guy gets hurt or gal, that
Hmm.
goes on an injury rate calculation for my sites. And the reason we do that is we don't want to pass risk on to the next
Hmm.
person so the next person gets hurt. We want to make sure that we're doing things collectively to run our business that drive risk down for everybody involved. So I think it's an important change in our industry that a lot of companies are going that route.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And like you mentioned, for our listeners, one of the things that we try to focus on in the podcast is exactly what you're saying now, and we'll kind of get more into the innovations, like you mentioned earlier. But before we do that, one of the things we like to do as well is to kind of provide an insight or an interest to the field that you're in and the position that you're in to people who might not have thought about that type of career.
Mhm.
And so, like you mentioned, we were talking before, there's 48,000 openings, but only so many qualified people. What would you say to someone who may be thinking about a career in this industry, and what would be the best piece of advice for them?
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice, if your heart's in it, if you care about people, this is a good field to be in, right? So outside of health and safety, I've been a fireman also for 20 plus years,
Oh,
firefighting. So it's been my lifelong commitment to help people, whether it's through firefighting,
mm-hmm,
through medical, or through the career that I do. If you're a person that enjoys that, there's a lot of great programs and great colleges where you can go get a 4-year degree in health, safety, and environment. Or if you already have a degree, you can go partner with these OSHA Training Institute centers, and you can get a certificate program around safety and in specific to the things that interest you. That's the nicest thing about health and safety and environment is the field is so broad that
mm-hmm,
you can go in and I can meet 10 other HSE folks, and they've got completely different backgrounds than me and completely different expertises. So some people
mm-hmm,
will be very good at industrial hygiene on reducing noise hazards and working with chemicals. Others will be a process safety person that's really good at understanding how materials move and pressures. Then you have folks that work on physical hazards, that work on construction sites, and are very good at making sure that fall protection's in place and that hot work permits are done so that the buildings are safe and not burning down. And there's just many different aspects of HSE. If you're a person
mm-hmm,
that's hands-on, I think that's what helped me become so successful in HSE is I was a person that worked construction, worked in a lot of those hazards, was exposed to a lot of the hazards with firefighting,
mm-hmm,
and was able to pull all that together into combined with the book knowledge and understanding health and safety. So when I go out with my team or out on the floor, I'm truly there to help, and I'm there for the employee. I work for the company, but if the employee is not safe and not benefiting, the company's not going to succeed. So
mm-hmm,
that's what I enjoy most about this field. And I would encourage people to get into those programs. There's a lot of programs in the Northeast through a lot of the big schools in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. I'm down in Pennsylvania. There's a couple great safety schools down here in Pennsylvania. So it really, and there's online opportunities, right? There's programs like Columbia Southern where you can do these programs at
mm-hmm,
your own pace. So if you're a person, a working individual that doesn't have the time, you can, enroll in one of these Columbia Southern programs and get your degree at your own pace on weekends and nights and whenever you have free time. So I think there's a lot of opportunity within our field.
Yeah, no, that's awesome too. I like the aspect you mentioned about if you like to help others and kind of using that skill, because I feel like a lot of people will want to have that type of purpose in their work, and they kind of think. I know myself before I even got into roofing, I was that type of person, and I only thought like, oh well, maybe the only types of jobs I can do that are like a firefighter, policeman, or
Right.
maybe a school teacher, and those are all awesome. But there's also other fields that are very, that can do that as well, and then kind of see the wide variety of jobs throughout that field. So,
Yeah, and the variety of each day. So, I started my day today doing a walk down. We had a contractor doing a repair of a fire line, so they're doing excavations or digging. So that's how I started my day. I was just down talking with that team, make sure everything was in alignment. And then later in the day, I'm with a security team talking about business continuity and how we're going to make sure we update radio systems and alarm systems,
mhm.
and test them this year. And so you're all over the board of what you get into in a given day, and that's what makes it interesting. I come to work each day, and no 2 days are the same, which I think is fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we hear that a lot in a lot of different operations and facilities jobs. And even myself, like I mentioned before I got into roofing, I was like, oh, I must be so, just every day looks the same. And now I was talking with Jeff, who's usually on here with us yesterday, and we were like, man, every commercial roof that we go on, every single one is different. And every solution for every client is different, but it's I think that's what keeps it interesting. And alongside with again having that um, drive to help others and fix problems for other people and keep them safe in that regard too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so kind of moving on and going into the future. I know you mentioned future of safety and just important systems to put in place. What are some things that you've done within your role to kind of keep moving forward or looking to the future?
Yeah, so something really neat, and it's a company based out of your region. We're working hand in hand right now with a company called Boston Dynamics, and I don't know
Okay.
if you're familiar with them. They make a
Yeah.
an autonomous robotic dog. And on
Yeah.
the dog, it has infrared cameras and sensors, so it can walk through mechanical spaces or go into confined spaces that we don't have to send humans to, and it can listen for air leaks. It can look at motors and analyze whether they're running at the correct temperatures or if a bearing is starting to go. They can walk out onto elevated surfaces like a roof, and they can look for water intrusion. They've got infrared cameras, so you can see where heat would be escaping from the roof or where there potential issues are. So there's thousands of use cases, but this is one of the most exciting technologies that I've been involved with and the AI. I know AI is a buzzword right now. Everybody's talking AI, but where
Hmm.
AI will help our industries going forward, this robotic dog uses AI to adapt to different tasks. So you give it a task, and it will get smarter and smarter at doing that task every time. And then it'll use its data to analyze what had changed and what parameters you're looking for. So just interesting, great technology. And
Yeah.
now it is expensive technology. The costs are coming down. So
Hmm.
you're going to go spend $250,000 on one of these and train it. But when you look at the grand scheme of it, I have on one of our sites about a quarter-mile underground utility tunnel, where right now I need to do confined space entry permits. I need to have essentially 5 people tied up while a person's doing that inspection in there weekly, and that's a lot of labor. Where now with this robot can run its program cycle, walk down through this utility tunnel, not need a permit, can do its report, send the data back to the computer and say everything's good. Here's pictures of where it's bad. This pump is making a little more noise. We should focus on maybe getting a shutdown window to do the repair. And that's neat, right? It's
Yeah.
saving, it's more productive, it's saving man hours and labor, but ultimately it's safer for the people because you're not getting exposed to that hazard. You're completely eliminating the need to go into confined space. So I think the technologies, whether it's these robotic technologies, the drones being used for what you guys are using for roofing or for in warehouses, I think there's a lot of use cases there. And then
Hmm.
one of the other companies I've been talking to, they're starting to use those Ray-Ban glasses, right? They have the monitor built into them,
Yeah.
and they have programmed where a person goes into an area and it'll start flashing up some of the hazards that are in that area or some of the precautions right on the glasses. So that's neat, right? Imagine being a roofer, being able to put the glasses on and look at the roof, and it tells you, hey, that's a 12 pitch without having to look at it, or
Yeah.
or give you information that you didn't have, right?
Hmm.
And also, it can warn you if you're wearing them. Hey, you're getting, you're within 10 feet of the edge of the roof, and send a warning out, or those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of technology that can really help in the future, aid people that are working for a living. And that's ultimately my focus in my career, is the people that are boots on the ground, working hard. Those are the ones we want to focus on. And I'm a big fan of Mike Rowe. I don't know if you've ever watched his, the Dirty Job series and everything. But
Hmm.
he had a slogan, if you get to watch it, safety third. You got to be looking out for yourself.
Hmm.
And really, that's what each person that's going on these job sites has to be looking out for their own safety. They got to be accountable for themselves. But what can we do to help facilitate a safer environment as a company, or as um, you know, uh, as humans towards others?
Yeah, and it's truly incredible, like what kind of technology is coming out and can be. You mentioned that it's a high cost right now, but I'm sure as years go on, it will become lower and lower as new things come out. And it's just incredible. We use AI to help estimate and make pricing easier and obviously get measurements and different things like that. But to look at it as like putting a robot out there to infrared scan and different things like that, it's coming to our industry for sure. I mean, it's already here, but being used more so in the future. But that's incredible to hear that these things are coming. And it's kind of like, I remember when I was a kid watching movies, and now it's like a lot of these things in the movies are everyday use, like
Really
robots
true.
and
Yep, yep.
AI glasses and all that kind of stuff. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, a lot of technology and development. I think the neatest thing with the AI platforms, when they're tied into the mechanical, like the drones or these robots, is
Hmm.
that they're able to think like a human, which is kind of scary, right? So if this robot dog, if they have a human version of it, which is called Atlas, if it's doing jobs and it's walking a walkway, and say a cart moves out in front of it, it's smart enough to see that cart moved in front of it, immediately calculate a new route to walk around it, and to keep on its task, right? And then they
Yeah.
also use it to program, so that it's most efficient. So if it's checking a whole building out and it's looking at different pumps and different issues, it will map the shortest route to go look at all those issues, so that it's using the least amount of power, doing it in the
Hmm.
quickest amount of time, so that it can come back and charge at its charging station. So there's a lot of science around it. It's awesome, and I'm excited to see where this stuff goes the next, maybe the next 10 years that I'm still working. Some of this stuff I'll see before I retire, right? Hopefully, but it's crazy, the innovation and the stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, and to your point too, I mean, obviously the efficiency is awesome and the increase of just helping out everyday tasks, but also like you mentioned, the safety behind it. It's putting it's doing it in a safer way and also mitigating you having to get into those areas, which have caused a lot of accidents across the world. I'm sure
Yeah,
in those types of inspections and daily routine things that have to be done. But it mitigates that, which is incredible.
yeah. But with these new
So.
technologies, we have to watch, right? Because it creates new hazards. So now you have a
True.
robot moving
Yeah.
with its own mind and its own
Hmm.
path, and we got to make sure that we understand that it's going to make some decisions and not always act the same way. And
Hmm.
there's other hazards that are new to you, not new to you guys, but are more prevalent. So you look back 25, 30 years ago, solar panels weren't very common, right?
Hmm.
Now you go in and you're a roofer and you're doing all these jobs, whether it's commercial or residential, and solar is now very popular. Well, if that
Hmm.
if that solar panel is seeing any light source, right? It's at full voltage, not full amperage, but it's at full voltage. So
Hmm.
understanding these new hazards, that even if I'm up there in the middle of the night and I'm shining a flashlight on it, that I could be putting full voltage in that panel. There's a lot of hazards that didn't exist 30 years ago, right? That are there
Hmm.
now. That you have to think through. How do we solve this? How do we make sure it's disconnected safely? How do we isolate? So a lot of these industries are encountering a lot of the same thing. If the auto industry, right? These hybrid cars and electric cars, those batteries are a lot of stored energy that we didn't have in the past. As a fireman, if I'm responding to an accident on the road, I used to worry about just a fuel spill. Now I'm worried about, once the battery hit, is that going to run away? You can't put it out with water. If it's a lithium battery, you're going to have a fire that you can't put out. So there's a lot of new hazards that exist because of these new technologies. So I think it's just
Hmm.
staying in tune with all these new hazards, keeping the people in all these industries apprised of what's going on, and making sure that we're pushing for safety standards or for ways of working that do look out for the best interest of the person, right, and the employee, and not necessarily the bottom line, right? So if it is
Yeah.
safer to go disconnect all those solar panels, for example, before the roofing work starts, let's do that. Yes, it's
Hmm.
going to take extra labor, but it's better than someone up there trying to work around and do repairs and have a live feed there that they could potentially get electrocuted. So I think there's
Hmm.
a lot of good with the technology, but it has created a lot of new hazards, and it'll continue to create hazards into the future.
Yeah, and to that point too, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people who are near the end of their career who have done things, especially in the last 20, 30 years of the technology booming, especially with AI now. What would be, a piece of advice or just kind of a suggestion on the people who have been in the industry for so long, have done it the same way, but now it's changing? What would your advice be to them to kind of make that adjustment or make sure that we're making the adjustments to keep safety top of mind?
Yeah, I think have an open mind, and I think it's tough because I come from the generation where you're trying to be tough and you don't want to show weakness,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I'll just go up, I'll get that job done, and I'm not worried about it, right? We have to get
Mhm.
out of that mentality and say, look, yeah, I would have done that 20 years ago. I would have just gone up and made that repair and not thought twice about it. But I think we need to step back and say, okay, if I do that, what is the maximum consequence? Like I could fall, I could be laid up for a couple months, like I could, experience be a fatality. What does that do to all the other people in my life and family and everything? And it's not worth it, right? So
Mhm.
I think the generations, your generation, and these guys coming out and gals coming out of school now are thinking a little more about not ultimately the productivity, but the whole package. They're valuing time with family a little more. I grew up in a generation where we're kind of the latchkey kids, right? You'd come home from school, your parents weren't there. You had to make your own dinner. You had to do all your chores and work. And as long as you were home before the sun went down, no one cared what you were doing. Where
Mhm.
now there's a lot more value on safety and life and family involvement and things that exist today. So my advice to the old crew like me would be open up your eyes. It doesn't hurt to put a little effort into trying these new ways of working and embracing the new technologies because it's here to
Mhm.
stay. It's not going to go away. And the faster
Mhm.
you learn it, so if you're one of those 30, 40-year veteran roofers that doesn't want to use a drone because you like climbing a ladder to do an estimate, give it a chance.
Mhm.
All that physical labor does a lot of wear and tear on you. If you cut down that wear and tear and have the wear and tear be on the drone, what is there to lose?
Mhm. Yeah. No, I like that. Awesome. What are some common mistakes that companies make while implementing these type of programs that you've seen at least, or you've heard of, or?
So the mistakes are a couple things. When you put programs in place um, and you don't see accident rates go down, right? They immediately think
Mhm.
it's not working. So uncouple or decouple risk with accident rates. The two are not directly related. There's elements of them that are related, but if you have a company that says, "Hey, I've worked 30 years without an injury," that doesn't mean they've worked 30 years without being exposed to risk and that there's not issues there.
Mhm.
So I think that that's the misconception. You see the old school signs where it says 300 days worked without an injury. That doesn't matter to me because the risks are there. So I'd rather see
Mhm.
how many risks have we found and have we eliminated from the workforce and taken away so that they couldn't get hurt. That's a better measure, right? So if we've uncovered 20 new risks and we've fixed all 20, let's be proud of that. Let's not worry about if we've gone 3 or 4 or 500 days without an injury. That's not the important part. That just puts a false sense of security on these companies. So injuries are all preventable, but they will happen, right? So we
Mhm.
have to understand that. And there's things that if you're familiar, if the listeners want to do some more research, there's a philosophy called HOP, human performance, operational performance. And one of the principles of HOP is that mistakes happen. People are fallible. let blame doesn't fix anything, right?
Mm.
We can go through and say the person should have known better, they should have been had more training. The blame doesn't fix that situation, so why focus on it at all? Let's look at the system, let's
Mhm.
try to make it safer for them, and let's move forward. It doesn't benefit anybody to be in that reactive mindset. The
Mhm.
people, we don't go to work every day wanting to get hurt. The systems and the equipment and the things we work with can cause situations that allow that facilitate us getting hurt, and we have to fix those.
Mhm.
That's where the important effort is spent.
Yeah, no, it's good. We a common theme that we've had on these first couple episodes that we've recorded, and just talking throughout the industry is what you mentioned there was that proactive or preventative look on things rather than a reactive one. And that's one thing we stress a lot in roofing for ourselves too is preventative maintenance, because it's better to spend a couple extra dollars to do that preventive maintenance, and then instead of getting a leak that leaked into your facility and shut down operations for a couple days, and
Yeah.
reacting to that. So.
And we have to be okay with failure, right? There's going to be products that
Mhm.
come out where you guys will have roofing materials where you go, I don't know if this is going to last the 30 years it says it's going to last, right?
Mhm.
And we've had those where there was different roofing companies that I won't name, or their membranes broke down faster from UV, and you had issues, and or
Mhm.
insulation systems had issues where the foam didn't hold up, or other problems. But those failures are going to happen. Let's learn from them. Let's get better, and let's move forward.
Mhm.
Talking about it and harping on how bad something was is not going to make it better either. So we need to embrace these new technologies and move forward. And a big thing, and you're in the roofing industry, but 40 years ago, ballast roofings were very common, right? You'd put
Mhm.
a membrane down and you'd haul 20 tons of stone to hold the roof down.
Mhm.
Now the fasteners in these systems have gotten so much better where, they're a hidden fastener where you don't have to penetrate the membrane and they attach to the surface and you don't need ballast to hold the roof down. That's a huge
Mhm.
improvement in the industry to not have to wheelbarrow and shovel and move ballasting material when you're doing a roof repair. It's crazy, but that was normal back then, right?
Yeah.
So it has gotten better. There's a lot of there's a lot of experienced guys and gals in your industry and others in construction and all these other trades that hopefully pass a lot of their knowledge down to this next generation, so that the next generation can
Mhm.
learn on how to do it safer, how to do it more efficiently, and how to do it better, and learn from our mistakes. Right? You don't want to see the same
Mhm.
mistakes come around things that we know aren't going to work come back. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to expand a little bit on that too. I think that's a very important thing that we can learn in the younger generation is not or taking constructive criticism. Basically, we were talking the other day on a roof and with a client, and he mentioned that it's everybody makes mistakes, but can you own up to it and can you grow from it, right? And I think that's something that people my age or younger have trouble with, and I'm not sure why exactly, and I don't want to generalize, but I know even myself sometimes I have to get my mindset to, okay, I want to get better rather than just pretend like I know everything, and do it the way that I think it's right, rather than listening to someone who's had 30 years, and we can grow from each other.
Right. Right. And you're starting to see some of the work methods we've had a couple roofs replaced recently at the sites that I'm at, and a lot of the vendors are bringing in a full out crane to lift all the materials they need onto the roof, right? Instead of using other, lulls and other forklifts and things
Hmm.
that they could have done to save money. They just stage it all and they'll bring in the heavy equipment right from the start to get it all staged and prepared correctly. And that costs a lot more money to do that way a lot of times, right? But when you
Hmm.
watch then how efficient they are, because all the materials are there and they're not worried about, hey, get more adhesive up here, get more rolled roofing. Everything's there. They can do the job more efficiently and quicker. It makes the job safer. The client is happy because it's not as impactful to their schedule, and everybody walks away safe. So the ways of working have changed, and it's good to see people spending upfront money and doing things differently than they did in the past.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So what do you think, what role does leadership play in making, safety systems effective?
Yeah, I think leadership for safety really is creating followingship, right? So
Mm,
you have to make sure you're being transparent. I'm a person where I put my pants on one leg at a time. You can call me the janitor, the cook, the chief, whatever you want to call me, and I'm
mm,
a person, and I look at each person I interact with the same way. I don't really care what their title is, what they're doing.
mm,
I'm there to make sure that if they have questions on how to do their job safely, I can help put them in the best situation that they can to do their trade or to do their job. So I think that the being a leader, you have to make tough decisions, throughout your career, and you're going to have to stand behind those decisions. But I think being consistent, being transparent, and truly showing care are the biggest things about being a good leader.
mm,
So, I look at some of the folks that I've worked with over the years. A lot of them are retired now, but I would follow them into a fire, literally, right? Because I
mm,
knew that they were that type of leader that always had my back, understood when tough times came up, understood how to navigate through it, and they showed compassion. And those are the types of people that I think the more we can do that, the better we are for one another, right?
yeah. Oh, awesome. And so kind of a follow-up question, if and this we always like to ask this towards the end of the show too, and kind of see try to get different answers and look at different people's perspectives on themselves. But if someone was a part of your team for a week, what would they know you for personally?
Yeah, I think they'll know me for my commitment to helping people,
Mhm,
number one and foremost. And I think I've had a very stable team. I don't have much turnover on my team.
mm,
I absolutely love the team that I get to work with every day, and it's we spend 70% of our lives working with others, and it needs
mhm,
to be fun. It needs to be enjoyable. It needs to be feel like a family, and I think that that's the atmosphere that we work in an accountable family, right? We're accountable to one another.
mhm,
We're not going to let each other fail. We're going to work hard to accomplish the objective that we're working on, but we're there for one another, and I think it's a great environment. Like I said, I'm proud of every one of my team members that are on my team, but I think that the true sign is that I would go work for any one of them any day of the week. Because I
mm,
know that they understand that this is about, it's all business, but it's about what is the objective? How are we going to work to it together? How are we going to accomplish it in the best manner? And sometimes people are going to fail. That's okay. We
yeah.
dust ourselves off. We pick it up and we move forward. Every job you guys do isn't going to be perfect. You're going to have mistakes that
Mhm,
get made. That's why there's the old expression, "Don't buy a car that's built on a Friday." Right?
mhm,
People are going to make mistakes. We're fallible. We're humans, but it's okay. But like you said, own up to it. Let's make it corrected and let's move forward.
mm. Yeah. No, great answer. Awesome. Yeah. Before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else that comes to mind to kind of to share with the listeners or anyone who might see this, and what you would kind of add to what we've already talked about?
No, I would just offer that, and I'll provide all my information your listeners, but they can find me on LinkedIn. I have an
Yeah.
open door policy. I will help anybody if there's questions. I don't want to see people hurt. So if there's a
Hmm.
situation or something that they're experiencing or something that they're going through and they want to talk to someone about what are options to fix this, what can I do to make this better? My door
Hmm.
is open to answer questions and help people. So I would offer that. They can reach out on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm pretty responsive on there. I'll get back usually within a couple hours, and
Hmm.
then I can set up calls and help them navigate through whatever challenges they're having.
Yeah. No, awesome. We'll post your LinkedIn in the bio or description of this episode, and we'll mention that as well. And we appreciate your time here and just the transparency and honesty of our conversation. And we're just really appreciative to hear more about your industry for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, and thanks for letting me be a part of the podcast. I think that these podcasts are very important
Mm,
moving into the future, right? So they're a good source of information for connections, networking, but also really to highlight some of the challenges that are going on in whatever industry you're in,
mm,
and have like-minded people talking through solutions and ways of working. I think it will speed up and make each of the industries more agile and
mm.
hopefully in the end safer and groom the next team of leadership coming up through these younger
Yeah.
generations, right? Maybe it grooms them a little faster.
Yeah, no, that's the goal. So, yeah, awesome. Well, we appreciate it, and I'm sure as we continue to grow, we might have you back on and chat more. But thanks so much for your time.
Anytime, Jacob. It's a pleasure meeting you guys and pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.